like to give a big warm applause to the 4 teams in this debate with an opening government Munich, opening opposition closing government Vienna, and opposition Tallin. On the motion, this House believes that men should consistently call out and correct chauvinist claims made by their friends and co-workers. I would like to invite the Prime Minister to open the case that stands in his name.
Ready? Dear Madam Speaker, we urge all of you, male, female, to always call out to your friends, correct them their claims when they make chauvinistic claims. And what do we mean by chauvinistic? We mean by chauvinistic if they show male superiority and or diminish female identity. We want you to call out to your friends, to your co-workers, to everyone. What kind of remarks would that be? We are mentioning that be remarks like, oh, don't be such a pussy, or something like, don't start crying, he just started crying like a girl, or, oh, she really convinced me by her 2 great arguments, or something like that, right? So whatever remark it may be, all of these remarks, please call out to them, go to them and tell them that this is not the right way to behave, and that they please correct and please apologize. Why do we think this is a huge problem? We'll talk about that first. What are the problems and the harms we're trying to prevent, and second of you all, I'll tell you why advertisement shows us the ways how we can actually convince people to do something, and we're using all of the methods advertisement used so well in this case. Okay, so what is the actual problem? We think that people have a systematic bias, an unconscious systematic bias against women. Where is that problematic? That's not only problematic what's the obvious case in job interviews where you actually have 2 partners and you just think, I just have a feeling, a hunch that this one is better, and people will tell you, yeah, just go with your gut feeling. We think that this gut feeling many times is just shaped by how you perceive women, and we think that if you hear constantly that women, for example, well, they're convincing not by their intelligence but only by their beauty, and you have the feeling that you need a job where you need some smart person, then maybe you go with your gut feeling and go the other way. We don't say that you yourself are a sexist. We're saying that even although you don't know it, you're being influenced by what you hear and do all the time. So we think this is bad for job interviews, for example, but we also think it's bad for your personal life. We think that it's bad because if you do these kinds of remarks, you may not even notice it, but you may hurt someone very heavily, right? You may just say something and walk off and not even notice that you're actually hurting the feelings of one person. What does that have an effect on these women if they have that? Sure. They may have crisis at home, they may be not happy, and they may then have problems in their personal life themselves. We want to go against all these things. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that using the 2 best mechanism advertisement has shown us. First of all, that repetition shapes your memory and shapes what you think. Repetition shapes your memory, okay? Second of all, word of mouth is so much more successful than everything else. So let me come to the first point. Repetition helps memorizing. If I repeat one and the other time one of the word, like bucket, 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 you'll all think about bucket right now, right? So that means it first of all gets into your mind. Then what's the second step? The second step is that you start believing what you're actually saying. So if I say a remark like, don't be such a pussy, and I say it over and over again, I really think that pussy, first of all, is some word I can use. Second of all, it's some word which for some reason represents a minor equivalent of values than something else. But if I do that, that's a bad thing. If I start correcting people and they start using the right words, then what do we get? We get 2 cases. It's not as easy, right? First case, they actually believe, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I just said he cried like a girl, but I didn't even notice that I was doing harm, that I was actually diminishing this. Where do we see that in advertisement and campaigning? When, for example, Democrats talk about healthcare over and over and over again, repetition, then at some point you think, yeah, maybe that was a good idea. Maybe I was wrong by not thinking about that, right? And I may get convinced. But then the opposition may stand up and say, but it's not that easy, right? You won't always think think what you're saying. And we say that's the second case, and we also are in favor of that case. If you don't believe directly what you're saying, you're still being involved. How is that happening? Look, for example, at the advertisement for Axe. You all know it, this deodorant where all of the girls come screaming and come after you. You won't believe that if you put on some fragrance, all of the women will come and just put you down. But what will happen is actually that after some time, if you've seen that often enough, you'll actually start buying that fragrance just because you get a hinge that, well, why not try, right? Why? Well, that might be better than all of the others where this is not happening. So you don't have to buy something all the way so that you actually get convinced a very tiny bit. Even if you get not convinced at all, then still you start repeating these words because your friends are bullying you. They're telling you, don't do that, don't say that, don't say that. You stop saying these things. So even if you don't believe it, all of the other people around you will not hear anymore these were two good arguments and so on, and will start believing themselves. So we get a critical mass, even if you don't believe it at all. I take closing.
Okay. Repetition only works if it is repetitive in the sense that everyone tells a sexist bigot that he is a sexist bigot. But if we are in a group of people when I'm the only one who is telling it, why do you think he will believe me, and why do you think he will change?
Oh, that's an awesome point to make just to come to my second point, because the question is, when do we believe people, right? So the actual status quo, how we try that, I'm actually coming to your question, pay attention, is that if we're trying to tell people what to do, the way we're going until now is we're just showing them signs. We're just telling them in school. So some teacher tells them, do this, do that. We all notice at 15 years old how well that works. As someone we don't like tells us something which is really, really important to him, but which we don't believe. But then the question is, how did advertisement get around that? If a company tells me my product is great, this is maybe not a way I will buy it. So we take the other way advertisement works, and this is word of mouth. Something you get told by someone you really like and appreciate is so much higher valued, and your time is up, is so much higher valued than anything some other entity, school, a feminist group, whatever tells me I am not identifying with. So if my buddy comes up and he's having a beer with me and he tells me, oh, don't make these remarks, right? They're just sexist. Then maybe I'll think much more about his remark than I would about a feminist group standing outside screaming, no, don't do this, don't do this. I would never listen to them because I don't appreciate them. But if I'm appreciating my friend and I hear it from someone I value, then I get some of the values I have for him, in some of the appreciation I have for him, and I take it into the message. So if someone you appreciate tells you something is good, something is important, then you're much more likely to believe it. And the proof is that advertising works exactly like that. If your friends tells you, hey, this is really a cool cell phone, then you're much more likely to believe him than if the company comes to you and sells you, this is the most awesome cell phone. And this is what companies have been doing. And we think long enough have we been looking at advertising which diminishes women. We think we do it the other way around. We use their methods to actually help the women cause, and this is what we're very proud to propose. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for that speech and invite forward the Leader of the Opposition to open the case for the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the floor. I'm very happy to open opposition side. I will have two main points for you today. The first one would be the counter-effectiveness of constantly correcting, and the second one would be we have to compromise in order to win big battles. Let's begin with a very quick rebuttal. The entire first part of the speech, we completely agree. We don't think chauvinism is good. We want to abolish it. The question in this debate is how we're going to get there faster and better. Second point, which was the important part of his arguments, was that repetition changes your memory. Please note, changing of memory does not mean that I change my beliefs. we didn't understand why. If something is being said over and over again, I will necessarily believe it. But moreover, when something is repetitive all the time, it has the chance of irritating me. I'm sick and tired of hearing this time and time again. Take, for example, a lot of commercial with small children with an annoying voice that you don't want to hear anymore and you want to get away from. But lastly, even if repetition is important, we will still only believe a presenter that we believe in or we can relate to. If this man has no relation to me and I don't conceive him as smart or anything like that, I won't listen to him. Lastly, there is the opportunity of running away from this repetition. If this commercial annoys me, I don't see the channel in which it appears all the time. The last point was speech and talking to each other is the best method of all. Most of my answers will be in the first case, but one thing that I want to stress out is, even if that's true, I will change a very near proximity of environment. We're talking about the office sphere. So if I'm a very good friend of Yael, Yael will probably change me. She will not necessarily change the office atmosphere, okay? So even if there is any good thing in that, it's very, very small. Let's begin with the first point, the counter effectiveness. So, as I told you, we believe that we need to abolish chauvinism, and we believe that chauvinism is bad. We also believe that chauvinism claims are abundant within society and appear in a lot of instances. Thus, when I'm the one who's always standing up, raising my hand and saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, excuse me, this is not politically correct, excuse me, I can't understand, you cannot say that in that environment, I become the officer. I become the one who's judging people. I become the one who people don't necessarily get very close to very fast, okay? The important point is I become a persona in the office. I'm not a regular colleague anymore. I feel a role. I have another cap on my head. I have ranks that I need to provide for. So, those people are less likely to change the conversation and are less likely to change the office atmosphere. And most important, they are less likely to provide for a better resistance. At the end of the point, I'll take second. Okay? So why is that true? 3 reasons. A, when I'm that persona, I'm weird, and I'm decent. It's not easy to approach me. I'm the weird one. Thus, not necessarily people listen to me very carefully. And lastly, I'm irrelevant. If I'm not laughing at any of your jokes, I'm a weird person and nobody can talk any logic to me, because if all of us are laughing and I'm the only one who's not, I'm a weirdo and there is nothing to talk to me about. Secondly, there's a good option of people who would just not talk near me and would not be chauvinist around me. Take, for example, Tel Aviv Debating Club. Nobody says any chauvinistic jokes because of Yael, and when Yael is going to the bathroom, we throw a small portion of a joke and be very careful to stop laughing before she comes back, right? Why is that very important, ladies and gentlemen? Because Yael cannot include a good resistance within Tel Aviv Debating Club, because she doesn't have the chance to rebuttal us with our stupid jokes, okay? And lastly, a lot of people, for example, think that radical feminist has no sense of humor and there's nothing to talk with them about. We think that this is the same. Those people who will go inside to this battle will be thought of exactly as a large portion of population think about radical feminism, that they're just inhuman in that sense of humor, of laughter, okay? Second.
Are as they are normally not accepted in society, are normally made in the form of jokes. This is time that they make fun, and therefore you get the respect from your colleagues and all the people around them. Why are racist jokes not accepted?
A, why are racist jokes not acceptable? We think that nothing can be abolished completely. Moreover, we think that we want to get to a point in which racism got today, because we were talking about racism, because we had a lot of movies and a lot of newspapers and demonstration and the government coming and talking to us about it and implementing laws around it. That's the reason why we got there. We didn't get there by people who are considered as neggers. We didn't go there because people within the office thought that racism was bad. We want to get to the point in which our country, in which our state acts together in order to denounce it. How will we get there? Second point. Okay, compromising to win battles. Okay, we want to achieve a very big achievement, okay? We want to lessen to a very small portion chauvinistic claim. Now, what happens today? Sorry, what happens if we are constantly nagging? So no chauvinistic claim is legitimate, and thus I already told you we'll run away from it. But if we'll laugh at, let's say, 2 out of 10, but then when a rape joke will come, we will all stand and engage in a huge battle in order to completely abolish the most severe way of chauvinistic claim, then we completely abolish the most extreme way of chauvinism. First step, ladies and gentlemen, is to get rid of the extreme. You want to talk to me about the small portion? Wonderful. We will do that after we achieve our main objectives. Now, if we want to change society's way of view, we have to appeal to the mainstream at the first stage. Why? They will accept us in an easier way, and they will come together with us and hold our hands. How are we doing that? We're not nagging about each and every small point. We win the big battles, and then when we are accepted, we go to the next stages. Thank you very, very much.
I'd like to thank you for that speech and invite forward the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case on behalf of the proposition.
Dear Madam Speaker, I want to extend the case for first government by analyzing our daily language and explaining and showing how it is chauvinistic almost in all spheres of our everyday lives. Before I'm going into that, I have 4 points of rebuttal. First point, they said, commercials annoy me, I rather would like to listen to friends. Exactly. That's why we are proposing not to do this in commercials and not to do state laws, but to implement our policy through friends that you acknowledge to respect and to listen to them yourself. So you acknowledge that our mechanism actually works. Thanks for that. Second point of rebuttal. I become the office officer. Well, first of all, we think that if you're doing the morally right thing, it is a good thing to do, then you should not care if you get bullied as the office officer. Second point, we say that against that, we say that at least all women in your office will be on your side. So if half of women and half of men will be in your office, you already are at the majority. And if you can win 1 or 2 friends, you are even a large majority. So at the end, the majority mechanism is on our side. And if you started it maybe, then the office officer will be a good and not a pejorative term. Third point of rebuttal. Well, racism is bad, but chauvinism, this is something totally different in everyday language. Well, ladies and gentlemen, how did we actually get rid of racism in the first place? In the United States in the 50s, 60s, we had United States court rulings and laws for equal treatment of black and white people. Did it change the society? No, it didn't change the society. Everything stood the same. How did social change and progressive change happen in the United States? In the case of racism, through people who stood up, literally stood up. I just want to remember Rosa Parks, the black woman who who stood up for herself, stood up for her rights in the bus, and then started the whole human rights movement through the Martin Luther King and so on and so forth. So it's the social change, you must get to it, and maybe if you want to start it, maybe you become even famous as Rosa Parks and will be the greatest office officer. Fourth point of rebuttal. You say, yeah, well, there are some extreme things like the rape jokes, and we do not like that, but the other stuff, it's not so bad, actually. And ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the thing that I want to show in my language analysis right now, that our language is full of these chauvinistic things, and this is bad because it makes female as inferior people compared to men. I just want to go through some spheres of our lives. Let's take sports, for example. Many people, I heard many people talking to other men, you run like a girl. towards other men. You run like a girl is probably a sentence that every one of us has listened at any point of his life. And what does this mean? If we analyze you run like a girl, then it means that you run badly, that you cannot run properly like in a sportive kind of fashion, but you run slow with your arms handling around or something. So if we say you run like a girl, this has an implicit statement of female inferiority in sports, and we think that this implicit statement is a bad thing because this is what Marco told you about. If you repeatedly apply the statement, you repeatedly imply that women are inferior. Second point of our everyday life, let's take school. How many of us have heard speaking to a girl that, well, of course you do not do well in mathematics, it's pretty hard, but still in history and languages you are doing great, so everything's fine. Implicitly, I do not say that everybody is doing that, all men are chauvinistic, but many men do so. And by saying that, well, it's great that you are good in German and it's great that you're good in French, implicitly states that you are not good enough in mathematics, and mathematics is like the best science in the world and the exact rational science. And by repeating it, men implicitly claim that women are not smart enough for these exact things. Or let's look at the office at work. Oh, nice dress, Janice. Like nobody ever tells me nice pullover, Vlad, but nice dress, Janice, is a very, very common thing that that women do not like, because some women think that they are reduced to beauty, that they are reduced to their clothes, and that the comments they get are only on, oh, no makeup today, Maria. And this is something that hurts many women across the world, and this is the harm that our policy will eradicate, because the friendship mechanism, as Marco explained, works because we trust our friends. Let's take the woman on the executive board. The woman, like there are 5 men and 1 woman who are leading an international company. What do we say? In German we have the term Quotenfrau. It's a pejorative term, like it's the only woman that only got this high position because she's a woman and because the executive board didn't want to look bad, like discriminating all the women, but one we can take just as an excuse that everyone else is male. And once again, this Quotenfrau term in German is a pejorative term that actually many people use to explicitly state the inferiority of women. Or let's take my last example with relationships. Like 2 guys talking in a bar, and then they say, yeah, and then we had a big fight and struggled about this one, and then she started to cry. And the other guy says, oh yeah, she started to cry. I know that. And they act and react at this policy and reaction of crying as something that is weak, as something is not rationally enough, as something that is wrong and inferior to their own, as some men think irrational things. Your question.
Okay. When you correct someone's language, they don't see it as a correction of language. They see it as an assault on their identity. Why your policy will be effective at all?
Thanks a lot. So right now I showed you that our language is on all levels chauvinistic. And what we now only have to prove to the whole opposition bench is, why should I risk my relationships, and why will people listen to me? And we tell you, because friends listen to other friends. This is the great difference between random debating people and friend debating people. Because if I say something to Marco, he will listen it carefully. And if he will not like it in the first place, because he knows that I'm his friend, he will listen to it twice, and maybe he will think about it carefully. And we accept that maybe in the first place, in the first day when I'm correcting him or he's correcting me, I may be affected, or he's may be affected. But on the long run, since we keep in touch discussing that matter, and by keeping in touch and discussing that matter, we at the end will come at the common solution. So the friends mechanism works because we trust people. In the first place, somebody maybe will be affected by it, but as we've shown you, all our language is chauvinistic, and this is why we have to constantly remind our friends not to do these chauvinistic terms. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for that speech and invite forward the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue the case on behalf of the opposition.
Thank you very much for this excellent motion. Okay, I'm gonna talk to you today about overprotection and what exactly is the role of the ally, which is the role of the man in those situations. But first, I will have 5 points of rebuttal. Basically, regarding your extension about the chauvinistic language, we agree. We applaud your analysis, actually. The only thing that we disagree with is the way you have presented the effectiveness of your mechanism. You did not engage with Thomas' analysis about our need to apply to the mainstream, to the average person who talks like this. Now, why? Next point of rebuttal. Regarding your analysis to commercials, you're saying, okay, doing it, saying it among friends, this is the best way because it's like a commercial. But no, in order for a commercial to work, I have to feel affiliated with the presenter. I have to feel that somehow this person related to me, and Thomas actually spent a lot of time showing you that this in time will be decreased. No. As for the office officer, you had an assumption that women will be on your side, and you have, and you didn't really analyze what actually happens in this situation. Well, first of all, unfortunately, there are some women who are chauvinistic, so you're not going to automatically have them rallying at your side. But second, I'm going to actually have a whole point about the problematic of you becoming the spokesperson for those women, and you're also deciding what is the best way to correct, because you are choosing a specific correction. I'm going to elaborate on that. Next point of rebuttal. Okay, you talk about racism and how we got well, not rid of it, how we decreased it through laws and that. Okay, we're all for laws against established discrimination and so forth. But we also realize that in order to change, to influence people's thought, the way that the social trends and culture and so forth, we have to have more complex role models. We need to have, like what we saw with the African American struggle and Martin Luther King, you cannot alienate people by constantly berating them. No, you have to maintain balance and to maintain an image of someone who is approachable, someone who doesn't act like a cop, but someone who actually inspires other people to become better people, because that person you're looking at is actually quite fun, quite interesting, and also kind of understands where you are and tries to help you instead of trying to police you all the time. And under your model, there will be only antagonism and disassociation. Last point of rebuttal. You seem to belittle Thomas' excellent explanation about the rape jokes. We do prioritize damages. I'm sorry, but a joke about the way women drive and rape jokes simply do not carry the same emotional effect, the same social effect. And we have to eliminate rape jokes. This is like a red line that we stand upon. We think that we're willing to sacrifice and bear some kind of stupid jokes about driving or whatever, and you did not engage with that either. Not yet, thank you. Okay, let's go to my analysis about overprotection. Why we have a problem with the men in this model usurping the women's voice, speaking for women instead of standing with women. What are we talking about? Look, the main problem we see here that this person actually reproduces patriarchal norms of chivalry. And what is the problem here? We as feminists, as women in general, we need allies. We are allies and we appreciate allies. But allies always in every minority struggle, allies have to take the back seat. They cannot champion the cause. Not yet. Why? Let's analyze. Okay, analyze situation where these things are said. Okay, sometimes there is a necessity for the man in this situation to come up and say something. But in many cases, these things are said in places where there are other women or women who are quite assertive and can stand up for themselves, maybe because they learned debating. No. Now, basically, when it is illegitimate to become the male feminist cop, because when that person actually ends up pretending presenting himself as a defender, as a savior, as the knight who's coming to save this damsel who is simply too weak to stand up for themselves. This is a problem because you're only reiterating stereotypes of the need to be protected, of being subjugated to some kind of a savior and so forth. This is not empowering for women. Not yet, thank you. This is not empowering for women. Second, we want to have a culture when women are used to standing up for other women. We want to encourage solidarity. And if you have a strong man, in social terms, that is willing to take up this role, then you are demotivating other women from stepping up and empowering themselves to do that thing. And you will not imagine like the African American movement being run or being led by a white man who serves as the voice instead of that movement. I'll take first.
Okay, so imagine I'm in the 50s in the US, I'm a shopkeeper and I hate black people and I just don't let them in. Who am I going to listen to that this is a bad idea? To the black people or to my white friend?
You will listen to your white friend if your white friend will not be someone that you end up disliking and feeling suspicious about his views and feeling disassociate from that person. Okay, the third problem that we have with this speaking, usurping the voice of women, is the danger of a wonderful word that some of you might know, men-explaining. Men-explaining meaning a man explaining to women or to other men what feminism is about, what it should be. Now, why this is the problem? Because this motion is also about correction, meaning how things should have been said and so forth. And the correction is not always the one that we want to. For example, why? Because sometimes the men themselves represent problematic perception. For example, if I'm like the man in the motion and I hear talking about someone calling her whinging and crybaby and so forth, and I'm going to come to her defense and I say, no, she's just as tough as any one of us. But this is not the correction that is necessarily needed, right? Because maybe the correction that we need is to say, hey, it's okay to be sometimes vulnerable or sometimes feel bad. It doesn't devalue this person. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about mansplaining. Sometimes the correction actually causes more harm than good. So for all those excellent reasons, we call you to oppose.
Speech, and I'd like to invite forward the Member of Government to continue the case for the government bench.
Madam Speaker, I'm going to go into 2 points of extension. First of them, how chauvinist behavior is passed on to children over generations and perpetuated. Secondly, how we change chauvinist behavior. Before that, I have 3 points of rebuttal. The first thing we heard from opening opposition was basically, people will be alienated if men like suddenly start calling chauvinist remarks. We think, well, you might be alienated like if you behave like a stupid dickhead, but just don't do that. Like we think there are ways to call out the chauvinist remarks, I mean, like without putting off like everybody who is around me. I think they themselves brought analysis how this actually works, because they themselves said like racist jokes are not accepted and banned with the social sanction. We think exactly this is what is going to happen with chauvinist remarks as well. People are just going to look at you in a very uncomfortable way if you make such a remark, and it's going to be called out that this is not a good thing. We think people are able to accept this. And then their analysis is, well, yeah, but it's not as bad as rapist jokes, right? Well, we think both of them are negative. We have heard no analysis why like not being as bad as the other shouldn't be a reason to get rid of it as well. Secondly, we heard it's kind of they assume that it's like a patriarchal hero syndrome or something like that because they take over women's job. So but Madam Speaker, notice that this is limited to a very specific context. The context opening opposition is talking about is where men make these remarks in front of women, where women have this active change to rebut, which is actually the words they use themselves. But we think this is not the context in which these remarks very often happen, because men behave differently in different contexts. Like something that I would say in a pub, I probably wouldn't say, like, for example, at a workplace where there are many women or so. So we think the context we are actually talking about is a predominantly male circuit, like where there are no women around to call out these remarks, and where men just still spend a lot of time because they spend, because this is where they hang out with their co-workers, where they go to sports or to pubs or something like that. This is the context we're talking about, and their entire analysis just doesn't apply there because it's not the man taking over the women's job there. Women are not there. It's just the man doing the job in the first place. Thirdly, we heard that the correction in itself can do harm because they're stepping in for women. We would really like to hear more analysis how it's such a bad harm that men step in for women as well. We might agree that there is a harm if it's done over assertively, what they are assuming on their side, but we've never heard an analysis why this would necessarily occur, and we just don't think this will be the case in most when men do that. No, thank you. So let's talk about my own points. The first thing we are going to add to this debate is a point about children and leisure, those places where chauvinism is passed on to future generations. Why are we talking about this? We think chauvinism is a problem that is passed on from the fathers to their sons. It's very often a learned behavior. Children behave like that because they noticed from their father was making the same remarks, or friends of the father were making the same remarks, and therefore it's okay. So we think this is also very, very important because this is how chauvinism, this is one of the reasons why chauvinism still exists, even though we are very aware of that. It's just a behavior we learned from very, very early on, and we think we need to tackle that if we want to change that in the future. So why are we also talking about male circuits, sports, leisure, and where fathers talking about taking their children? Because we think these are the things where the women does not have an influence, and the children actually see, well, this is how men behave, right? This is how my father's friends behave. This is how I probably should behave if I want to be a man. And we think especially sports is a very important context because we think in sports is something very emotional where people just do not are very often not really aware of their own remarks because they are in an emotional context that's different to what they normally have. So we think for example, men that usually want to educate their children well probably won't make any chauvinist remarks as long as they're aware of that, but if they take the children to the sporting place, it's exactly those things that these remarks happen just because they're in a different context for their friends where they assume it's okay and where they're very emotional to think about it. We think it's very important in these cases that it is pointed out, and this because of two reasons. First of all, it prevents children from learning that this is a good thing. We think if men stand up on the sporting place, if such a remark comes out, this means also that children see, well, this is obviously not how I should be behaving as a man, because otherwise, the friends of my father wouldn't be complaining about. And secondly, because as we've already heard, this behavior is to a certain kind learned. So if the men themselves think it's very accepted, they're just more likely to come out with these remarks and pass them on to their children on these places. So we think if we want to change that problem and not perpetuate it to future generations, it's very important that men stand up and tackle the chauvinism where they are without women as well. Yeah, I take closing.
Okay, motion specifically tells you colleagues and friends. We are not against good parenting.
Colleagues and friends, but who do you go with to a football game, right? It's like the co-workers together that bring their sons. It's these places where you go with your friends as a father with your sons. It's stuff like that where you spend your leisure, and this is the time that's exactly spent with co-workers and friends. Therefore, we think this is very relevant to this motion. But on to my second point of extension. We think also this is very effective in changing behavior, and I would really like to add some analysis how this is done. Because we think behavior is very learned. We either make these chauvinist remarks because we think they are accepted and we are not aware of them themselves, or because we want to have a positive reaction. So how does this change? For example, if we want to make a joke, we want other people to accept it and find it good, right? That's the reason we make the joke in the first place. So how does this change if people start calling out these remarks? We think this changes immediately because it means the joke doesn't get the positive reaction in the first place anymore. You suddenly get sad faces when you make a joke like this, and they think it's a social sanction that has shown to be very effective. For example, on racist jokes, as we've already heard. Secondly, we also think it is something that will make people aware of that this remark is chauvinist in the first place. Like many men are probably not aware when they make such remarks in their friendship circles that this is something that is chauvinist. We think if they and probably they do not, and if they do not want to make, probably they do, if they do not do that on purpose, it's very important for them that somebody calls out and takes them. So we think, how does this trickle through to actual behavior? We think even though you behave differently in different contexts, your values don't change. If you take the value of women you learn in a pub, that's what you also take into your life, and that is something we want to change. So therefore, I beg you to propose.
I'd like to thank you for that speech and invite forward the member of the opposition to continue the case for the opposition bench.
Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, a clarification. Rosa Parks is famous because she did not stand up and not because she stood up. Now, there's a little bit of frameworking that is missing in this debate. First of all, it's a little bit unclear still, what are these examples that we're talking about? So I'd like maybe the opposition last speech can clarify. So next time you're told that you're running like a girl, what is it that you call correcting and calling out in that situation that you think every man should in that case do? Just like to give us a little bit more understanding of what exactly we're debating against. But it's not like the hugest issue. There's some bigger issues with the way they're framing this debate. So first of all is that the opening government uses in their rebuttal the idea and framing working environments and framing this debate around situations where there are both women and both men, and wants us to focus on those situations. But now closing government, to their convenience, says, well, usually we're talking about situations when there are only men. I think it is not our burden to say that there is no situation when it's legitimate or it's good or effective to call out chauvinist claims. But what we're saying is that men should not do this regardless of occasion, and men should not have this obligation or this moral, whatever they're talking about, to do this everywhere, both in only male groups and both mixed groups, right? Finally, the POI of Misha is important because we believe that about 3 minutes of closing government is about parenting. We're not against good parenting. We believe that this is something that should be taken, should be talked about at home. But we believe that all our points apply to the situations, or they have not really shown and really added too much in terms of children and in terms of why specifically those situations are the most dominant ones, because as I already pointed out before, we don't really believe that they can focus on specific situations, but they have to defend every situation. So what I'm going to bring you is, first of all, the work of the word should in this debate, and what is this debate even about. Then I'm going to talk about how it is very patronizing towards women for a man to call out, and extend a little bit on that, and say why it is wrong for men to hijack the definition of chauvinism, which is what they are proposing for men to do. And then I'm going to talk about why the specific superficiality of these interactions that we're talking about are going to actually backfire on all the ideas that they say. Just quickly, one idea of rebuttal. The reason we have the word Quotenfrau is not because not enough men are calling out or not enough quotas are set in place. But it's specifically because there are things in society that are perceived as being artificial. It's specifically because people find it legitimacy in their head to their chauvinist ideas because they feel threatened by something, that is there to artificially set the gender balance. And so on. Thanks. Oh, thanks. So why do we have the word should, right? I feel that merits a little bit more discussion. We say that generally, we don't believe that people should have moral obligations to sacrifice themselves, moral obligations to ever give up something, with just one or two exceptions, right? So what we believe firstly is that even if you believe that government has shown that this is something that will be effective, they have still not won the debate because they have not shown why men should take on this sacrifice for the sake of this social change. But of course, we also say that they have not really shown that they've changed anything. So, no thank you. We acknowledge people's right to spend their money whichever way they want, right? They don't have to help the world, they can even damage the world. And this is something commonly accepted, right? We don't force or actually even encourage people in most states to go to animal shelters with their time, but instead we allow them to invest it in anything, right? There's a clear distinction that we draw from a cost in taking part in society, which is that you pay taxes if you want to get paid, but the rest is up to you. And we believe that this is something that should also be applied to this debate, insofar as men should not have an obligation and should not be forced forced to sacrifice themselves. No, thank you. So why is this a sacrifice? First of all, because you can alienate those friends, because we're talking about co-workers and friends, so you can alienate them if it is really something that they, like if chauvinism is really a part of their identity, or even if it's just something they used to joke about and like think it's funny. It's more difficult to be promoted if you're the guy who keeps calling out others, right? So it's a sacrifice in all your other aspirations. So it is not just a loss of status, but also it's more difficult to form intimate relations, which we not only believe is something that all men should strive to do, but is more importantly also the basis for any kind of changing of people's beliefs and so on, right? So recognize that everything the government says, even if it is true to the very last word, they have still not shown why men should do it if it is a sacrifice that they take, because generally in society we don't say that someone should sacrifice themselves just because of these social goals. No thanks. So why is it patronizing towards women? We already heard some chat that what the signal that those men send by calling out that chauvinism is that those people that first government says are insulted in that group cannot stand up for themselves. And we believe that this is like one case where it's okay to call out first government on chauvinism by doing like this kind of plan, right? Secondly, we believe that why this is insulting is because those men say that the signal behind calling out is that this is something that women should feel bad about. Me, if I tell you, Vlad, that you should not have said that I run like a girl, that means I am implying that women somehow need protection from these jokes. I'm implying that some women in this room maybe should feel bad about the fact that we say that they run differently, or that some people say that. No thanks. So what happens is that men effectively hijack the definition of chauvinism if they keep calling out. They decide when does it merit calling out, when does it merit criticism, right? First of all, it perpetuates the male-dominated discourse, right? Which is something they're trying to solve. But secondly, if we accept their idea of repetition forming your values, that means that women are constantly repeated to that. First of all, they need standing up for because there's men in the group who do it, and secondly, that there are some specific things that maybe they don't really even feel bad about, but that are constantly, they have to listen to, they're closing in a second, that they constantly have to listen to it. But I think he was standing. Is it okay? Yeah, okay, go.
So what you were saying is that this is a sacrifice for men because it's very rare and not accepted. We think, well, yes, it will be even more accepted if more men do it, and isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, well, it's the same. I'm not against gender equality, but it's the same with any kind of social change. We just say that when you have to debate that men should do it, so therefore they have an obligation to do it. We're not defending that this is a good way of changing the society. We say that even if it will become a norm in 50 years, the men who have sacrificed their lives to do it during this time should not have this obligation. Right? Like this is debate, right? This is not just whether or not gender equality is good. So, since these interactions are superficial, it is seen by real chauvinists as a personal attack. So they feel more threatened and therefore radicalized. B, it means that maybe they will take on the debate. They will say, so what do you have to show that women actually do run like men? Two outcomes. First of all, if you win the debate, they will feel even more threatened. Like if you actually have studies that women run the same way, they will feel even more threatened and even more radicalized. But more likely, since we don't have those studies, at least most of us don't have them with us, if we lose the debate, they will have more encouragement that it is actually something that they believe that is actually correct and maybe even scientifically proven because like a debater challenged them and was not able to win, right? So, all in all, recognize that there's this word should in the motion that should change the way we talk about it. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for that speech and invite forward the government whip to close the case on behalf of the government bench.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the floor. What I'm going to do is sum up the debate on two major points. First of all, workout. Actually, does it simply work what we're going to do? And second of all, men, are they really needed, or are women able to do it on their own? We think no, because simply there are no women around, therefore this is also not chivalry, therefore we think we need men. But before that, 3 points of rebuttal. First of all, they say we have nothing against good parenting. It is important that the boy gets exception in the society. But the issue is, what is the good parenting he's actually talking about? He's seeing that the daddy is going to the football stadium, makes a chauvinistic joke, and everybody laughs. So therefore, dad gets appreciation. If dad is not chauvinistic and doesn't laugh but doesn't say anything against it, we simply see that the other dad, for example, is more accepted. So therefore, this is the behavior you want to learn. The issue is, this way of good behavior or good parenting you're saying here, you simply give it to men. Because even the dad makes a chauvinistic joke, he simply will also apply to the boy, well, you can make it here, but don't do it at home. Not when mom is around. Because, yeah, we are cowards, as leader of the position already said it in the first place. Second of all, sacrifices. The issue is what they say, every man should have a moral obligation whatsoever. First of all, if you're chauvinist, we don't think that you will call out against yourself. This doesn't make any sense. So who are the men actually we are talking about? We are talking about the men that are not chauvinistic, simply those people who are able to speak up because they think it is first of all wrong. So what is the case, what they're sacrificing? They're actually sacrificing nothing because they're simply doing that what their values are. And simply you're saying what you stand for is quite good. It's as you're standing on the Manchester there and saying, okay, you're from Man United. Second of all, as Stefan already pointed out in the PUI, the issue is the less the better. Simply saying the less things you are conflicted with racism, the less shops you had in the US which says, okay, no, only whites allowed, the more this got removed, the better it got with cessation of racism. Therefore, the issue is the less men do the chauvinistic jokes and talk about it is better. Because it's only is able to get out and it can be still harmful for women if it is generally accepted in male groups and therefore accepted within the society. Therefore, we don't think this is a sacrifice because you're already standing on this value because otherwise you wouldn't be inflicted by that motion. Next point. Alienation. The issue is, first of all, if I call out or want to correct somebody, I need to speak to him. So this is the same as with feedback afterwards the debate. So simply, I need to talk to the judge needs to talk to me, otherwise it will not work out. So this is the first case. The issue is to think about it, and you should correct him in some way. The issue is therefore what you're doing in the first place. The only thing the side opposition is telling you all the time, what should be alienated are women, because we're doing these jokes only when women are anyway not here because we think it is not correct anyway. Second of all, even if we say, okay, you are in the complete chauvinistic circle whatsoever, and you are the only guy that is not chauvinistic, well, first of all, we think you didn't choose your friends well in this respect. And second of all, if this is an alienation happening, simply you have your hardcore chauvinistic guys, we don't think this is a problem because they are alienating themselves from the other selves. Simply saying, I think it is quite good that the KKK in the south of in the south of the US is simply alienated and hasn't any further things. No thanks. After my first clash. First clash. Working out. The issue is, what opening government brings to you is, does it work out? Yes, because friends have influence. And this is also about the shaving your mind. It's simply doing it the same tables as advertisement. This is the issue what they bring you from opening government. What we bring to you is even more important. Simply to the issue, what we bring you is the idea about jokes and how this actually working in this group of a specific man. Simply saying, okay, you are standing somewhere where no woman is around, this is fine. Because then you have a positive reaction, dear Madam Speaker. This is always about closed activities. The issue is, opening opposition then stands up and says, no, because the people, you will get away with it. But the issue, and women should stand up for themselves, all this idea of chivalry and whatsoever. But the issue is women are not around there. Simple saying, dear Madam Speaker, if you're going then to judge us and you go on the toilet, you will have no ability to engage with your two male colleagues on the panel because you're simply not there, so therefore you can't speak up for yourself. So therefore, it is working out. Before I go to my needed go.
Okay, how soon will this feminist dad you're talking about will be shunned from the sports bar or all these other male-only groups, and then the change will be nipped in the bud? It will not happen at all. You need to engage with that.
Once more.
The change will be nipped in the bud. There will be no change because no one will want to talk to him. He will not be invited.
Yeah. The issue is what she's talking about is actually only the case if you have a large majority of people that accept chauvinism, because you can only alienate themselves on a correct on a behavior when you are in the minority. First of all, you're telling us that chauvinism is not accepted in society and it will not be accepted by women anyway. So we're talking here about a large majority of the society. The issue is therefore when she stands up and asks me, okay, this will nip out in the bar and go on whatsoever. The issue is therefore there will be also a large amount of men there who are against chauvinism who will see about it. The issue is also that the people need to stand up against it, because otherwise it will never stop, and the step what they told you in the first opposition will never occur. Because what they basically are telling you from the beginning is, okay, the solution is to do it step by step. We can't win big battles, we need to compromise. But the issue is the small steps can never happen. Dear Madam Speaker, you simply need to imagine how will you ever influence the talks on a man's toilet. We think you don't need it. You can't do that. Next point. Are men actually needed for this?
opening opposition stands up and says, okay, the issue is, this is like chivalry, simply as the man needs to help the women because the woman is incapable for themselves. But in your example, in the leaders of opposition speak, he says that he's waiting for his team partner, that she is going on the toilet before he's starting the jokes. But this chivalry point is completely not working now because the woman isn't there at all. Then what do we bring you against this? For opening government stands up and tells you the problem is chauvinism is everywhere. It is hidden because it's not accepted in society, but it is somewhere around, and therefore we need to fight it because it is under the border. What we bring you then is the more important stuff, because it is there around because the man is first of all passing it to the son, simply saying, okay, women are not normally going that much to football games or sports events either, and even sports is there is especially important because women and men are separated in the women's dressing and the men's dressing room. Second of all, the women therefore have no influence in this and no chance to stand up and fight against it, simply because they are not around and have no choice. And the last point, which is the most important, is the way the issue is. Leader of opposition stop, okay, these jokes, they don't hurt anybody, but they are still there. We give him the eye and racist jokes, why they are bad, he can't reply on that. The issue is, why is this? Because jokes are, as we already told you, gives you this positive reaction, the positive reaction from everybody who is around you, and therefore you will continue doing that. But the issue is what to transpond with this, is this underlying message that is hurting women, that is hurting the implicit values that are standing behind this. And we think this is that. However, closing continues after Stefan already talked and stood up, okay, we don't need to do that because women can do it on their own. We have clearly shown that this is not possible because those are the special situations that we're talking about, the situations where this is so necessary that men stand up. Dear Madam Speaker, because it's working out and men are needed for it because women are not incapable, but they're simply not there, therefore they have no chance to stand for it, and we need to act against it, and this is passed on from the father to the son. We need to stop that. We beg you to propose.
The opposition whip to close the case on behalf of the opposition bench and the debate as a whole.
3 points to summarize the debate. First of all, why it is extremely ineffective. Second of all, why individuals don't have a moral duty to sacrifice themselves to make the world better. Third of all, why we think it is especially bad if it's done by men because it is so patronizing. Starting the debate with the effectiveness. So we have a shift in this debate from the second proposition side, because they wanted to call out people only in the situations when they are isolated groups and only if the men around them. We say that first of all, it is not our burden to defend that every single time when you want to call out. You have to actually bring that man in an isolated group in order for not for women to hear it. But moreover than that, we say that that notion will still exist. Women will still know that when that men are standing for them. So our harm on the patronizing issue still exists. Moreover than that, we specifically told you in our extension how that simplistic interaction doesn't put those individuals to think, especially when you're in an isolated group who we believe share the very same beliefs at being very misogynist, because this is the way how we form our friends on the belief which actually unites us. So we don't simply say that just telling us about those isolated groups and no women present is enough for you to rebut our point. They told us from the first proposition that repetition shapes memory. This is only true if everyone around you continues that repetition. If you are the only one leader in a group who actually repeats that over and over time, as First Op already told you, you are a leader, you're not taken seriously, you're not taken into consideration. What we specifically point to you is that those people are irritated in many instances because you acknowledge that in many cases those things are in the minds subconsciously. That is why they don't believe themselves to be sexist, and they don't want to hear that over and over again. Yeah. No. What we added to that is that not only you are a weirdo, but you also commit an assault of those individuals, or they at least perceive that as an assault. Because no one actually, outside of the debating, thinks that when I rebut someone's argument, I'm actually rebutting an argument. Everyone thinks that I'm thinking that you are a bad and incorrect person. This is how our world works, guys. In that instance, those individuals take it as a personal assault on their identity. They are insulted, they are less likely to listen what you're telling them to do, they're more likely to be prone to do the other things. To the second argument, do we have the moral responsibility? Well, first of all, we have this weird chat about how children and parents should inconvene. So first of all, we are not like against good parenting. We say that that should exist. The difference is here. You have an obligation towards your child to raise that child in a good way. You don't have the obligation to change the world to the better extent or change the world to the better place, and I will tell you specifically in highlighting our extension why. Then they told us that those interactions occurs on the football stadiums when there are adults around you. So first rebuttal, don't bring children to an environment when people are likely to actually insult someone, especially women. But secondly, it is not the kind of change of mindset which occurs, because what it is just to deal with your friends, but we do not swear when the children are around. They are not changing their mindsets, they are just supposing that we shouldn't do or shouldn't impose something on children. And lastly, they tell us, it's a very good thing, is that how we already having values should follow those values. If I have a value that I don't have a dictator, should I be obliged to go to a country to fight that dictator? No. We say that having certain values doesn't necessarily mean that you have an obligation to actually follow those values. We already told you that I can make this world better by donating my money to charity. Nevertheless, I don't have an obligation to do that. Why this is true? This is true because obliging people to do so will create a very crazy world when every single instance of my existence should be devoted to making that particular world better. We tell you that individuals are autonomous individuals who should have the right and whose rights should be deserved, respected, irrespectively of the outcomes they produce, irrespectively of how they change the world. So when you ask them to constantly correct others, and you will actually making them as a tool for the societal change, and you haven't shown us that you have an obligation to do it in the first place. A very good example on that. If I see a person drawing, I should help that person only if that doesn't harm me. We explicitly told you how you create a sacrifice when you're working in an environment when everyone around you is chauvinist, and you stood up. Your ability to get a promotion, your ability to actually get along with the colleagues, your ability to resist the comeback at you is hindered. So you put your career, you put your social life at stake, and you've never shown us that that obligation to do that exists in the first place. Closing.
Well, your argument is contingent on the idea that very few men are doing it. Why does this mean there shouldn't be more men doing it?
Because I don't have an obligation to make in every single instance the world a better place. That is a good thing to have. This is not an obligation to impose on individuals. This is our argument. Now, why it is so patronizing? We already told you from the first opposition how it actually creates the notion of the protectiveness, how women are weak and we need a man to step in to correct their behavior or to be protected. We specifically told you in our extension how it complies with the notion of the patriarchy and how it makes it worse. The very crucial harmful thing about patriarchy is that it tells women what they should be. This is exactly what you're doing, because you're telling women that you should be vulnerable, because you're telling women what language you should be susceptible to, because you're telling women how you should behave in a certain social situations. We think that once you do that, you deny the woman the freedom to be like that, but moreover you create the notion for other women that they should comply with that stereotype. And once they don't, they're outcasts. Once they don't, there's something as not seeing normal, and so on and so forth. When you do it consistently and repeatedly, you instill that notion into the heads of the woman, instill that notion into the heads of the other society, and just confirm with the very stereotype you're trying to fight off. This is not effective, there is no more obligation to do it, and it creates very certain harms on the patronizing level we strongly oppose.